Which brings us to your case.
Sure.
You came to the FCC with a plan.
Right.
What was that plan?
Our plan was to take a piece of spectrum that has been lying fallow, effectively underused, with no rules, nothing developed for it for the last 4 or 5 years. Actually, it runs about 7 years. But specifically, 4 years ago, the Commission said, we have this piece of spectrum. We are trying to figure out what the highest and best use for this is. 2 years later, we stepped in M2Z networks. We're backed by a number of Silicon Valley venture capitalists, people that have invested in Google, Amazon, Netscape, sort of the internet space. And we said, hey, we can actually take this spectrum and do a couple of things. One is provide a nationwide competitor in broadband. And the second thing is, we think in order to create innovation and interesting applications and all those kind of things, one of the key things you have to do is create a free network nationwide. Not free spectrum, but free network, meaning anybody who wants to can connect to the network without paying fees, and also use any devices that have been developed to work on that particular spectrum. So, basically the idea formulated out of the notion of free over-the-air television and free over-the-air radio, which is you go to the store, Radio Shack or Best Buy or Walmart, you buy a piece of equipment that connects to the network, and you immediately get connected to a set of broadband applications just like you do. And in the United States, you can go pretty much anywhere in the United States and get 3 to 6 free over-the-air television. And we wanted to translate that level of service availability and affordability for broadband as a matter of national policy. We think by making that, by creating this environment where it's easy to connect, it's inexpensive to connect, 2 things will happen. One is a lot of people will get connected. That 50% of the population will immediately connect. The second thing that will happen is a lot of people in Silicon Valley who are creating interesting broadband applications, right, will have an incentive to say, hey, why don't we come up with something interesting to take the 50% of the population that has not been, on the network, and give them some increased reasons for using more broadband. We think that innovative proposal, using a piece of spectrum that nobody else has sort of figured out what to do with, was a good way of sort of deepening this policy.
Now, this spectrum isn't the one coming up for auction next year.
No. That spectrum, Congress in 2005 basically said television broadcasters should, when they move to digital television, should be, put further up into the spectrum, and this spectrum that's been freed should be, sold and or auctioned into the marketplace. That spectrum is in 700 megahertz. It's very attractive. There's a lot of people that have a lot of ideas, but it's also been pending for about 10 years. This was an auction that should have happened 5 or 6 years ago. So finally, Congress decided and said, okay, we really have to make good use of the spectrum, directed the FCC to have an auction in January of 2008. And sort of clear the path to make this thing happen, even though it's been sort of sitting around for 10 years. The spectrum that we're looking at is actually outside of that, and it's not as sort of propagation-wise, or the way that it works is not quite as attractive. So there's been very little demand for it. Very few people sort of have ever looked at it. What we did is this is Silicon Valley entrepreneurship, innovation, which is we looked at something that nobody else could find value in. We said, hey, we can create this really great, unique application. We filed an application with the FCC, a license application, and we said, let's make a quick decision. Let's sort of see if we can get this thing to happen as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, on August 31st, the FCC decided to sort of think more about this proposal. Now, we've sort of been in, since our license application is 18 months. And one of the things that you have to understand from a Silicon Valley perspective is 18 months is a whole product cycle. You get the iPod, and then you get the iPod Nano, and, all these innovations that sort of happen within sort of 18 months. So to have the American people wait or wait more than this time period to figure out how to make use of the spectrum to create competition, to solve the digital divide, all these kind of concepts that we had put in our applications, we think it's unfortunate to have that delay.
So why'd they say no to you?
Well, I think the FCC, sort of the rationale, to the extent that we can understand it, is we need more time to consider whether this is a good proposal or not. And again, what we think it's a good proposal. We think the Commission will eventually sort of figure out how to make a free broadband available nationwide. And again, our proposal was not to get any federal government subsidies. In fact, we averred from actually taking any universal services funds. We also committed to deliver free services to the public safety community. We also committed to build this network very rapidly, a third of the population in 3 years, two-thirds of the population in 5 years, and 95% of the United States population using entirely private capital to build this network, because folks in Silicon Valley really believe that if you had if you have 3, 4, 5, 6 different competitive networks nationwide, that innovation would bloom and consumers would benefit immensely. 2 unrefuted economic studies that we submitted to the FCC, and there's a whole long process that went on, unrefuted entirely, in its entirety, said that just our entry into the marketplace as a third nationwide network would generate to the American consumers somewhere between $18 to $32 billion. That roughly equals to about 2/3 of the tax cut that President Bush passed or signed into law in 2001. $600 per family. This is roughly equal to about $400 per family. That's an amazing statistic. Just one new entrant into the space would generate that level of benefits for the American families. The other thing we also talked about, this free service, there's sort of a screaming demand for an alternative network, for not just for competitive reasons, but there's a lot of people who view the internet with some level of trepidation, because the internet, very powerful, but also brings with it some pain, such as things like pornography. So the challenge is, I want my child to be connected to the internet, but I'm not sure I really want them to be connected to the to pornography and the kind of things that are scary for parents. And one of the things, again, we said as a matter of public policy, it would be great to have a network in which this free service, and only limited to the free service, not any sort of paid services that would come on top of that, would essentially filter out indecent and obscene material in order to protect children. Again, the idea is you want to get people connected quickly with not a lot of headaches, not a lot of issues, but then make sure that at least when children are connected, that they are protected from the sort of pernicious aspects of the internet. It's somewhat controversial, but we think as a matter of policy, we apply the same concept in free over-the-air television, free over-the-air radio. We can always have a debate as to what the right way it is. But again, as a matter of public policy, having a free network nationwide that's readily available and very affordable, we think would be a fantastic solution.